A gaping hole in the sun bigger than 60 Earths just blasted solar wind right at us. A giant hole in the atmosphere of the sun, more than 5 times larger than the diameter of Jupiter, is unleashing a powerful solar wind that's blasting through the solar system. It's called a coronal hole, and it's currently rotating away from Earth, but a few days ago, from its position straddling the equator, it was pointing right at us, directing a stream of particles in Earth's direction. The result was nothing to be alarmed about, a mild solar storm, but the hole does contribute to a wider pattern of rampant solar shenanigans as we enter solar maximum. The sun has been quite rowdy lately, and which is a sort of to be expected. Our star goes through activity cycles in which it gets more active with sunspots, solar flares, coronal mass ejections, and coronal holes, like in this case. This activity escalates to a peak solar maximum before subsiding again towards solar minimum, a period of relative calm and minimal activity. This cycle appears to be driven by or coincidence with the sun's magnetic cycles, during which the solar magnetic field reverses polarity and its north and south poles switch places. This switch happens at solar maximum, which is due to take place sometime the next year, 2024. You probably know about sunspots, solar flares, and coronal mass ejections. A sunspot is a temporary spot on the sun where a magnetic field gets quite a bit stronger. This results in a cooler, darker freckle on the sun's face. Solar flares, or coronal mass ejections, are enormous, and coronal mass are enormous and often associated with sunspots that are caused by a giant release of energy that occurs due to magnetic field lines snapping and reconnecting. A coronal hole, as in this case, by contrast, is a large region where the solar magnetic field opens up. They cannot be seen in optical light like sunspots, but when we look in ultraviolet wavelengths, we see huge dark patches that are dimmer than their surroundings because they are cooler. And because the magnetic field is open, the wind that constantly blows from the sun can escape more readily. The result is a more powerful gusting of solar particles and plasma out into the solar system, flowing around any planets that may be in their path. The current hole, which at the time of writing is almost rotating away to the far side of the sun, is a beginning as per space weather. It measures around, it's a big one that is, it's measuring around 800,000 kilometers, that's 500,000 miles along its longest axis. Jupiter's diameter is around 140,000 kilometers. Earth's is 12,742 kilometers. The hole was facing Earth around 2nd of December, and the solar wind smacked into us over the course of December 4th and 5th. The result, as per NOAA, was at most G1 to G2 level solar storm. That's the mildest of the solar storms that can hit us, and not much would have been noticeable to most of us. And here's what happens. Particles from the solar wind hit Earth's magnetosphere and get diverted along magnetic field lines to the poles, where they're deposited into the upper atmosphere of the Earth, and there they interact with atmospheric particles to create an auroral glow, which is pretty nice. We're talking about northern lights. The enhanced currents in Earth's ionosphere and magnetosphere can also interfere with power grids, satellite operations, and radio communications and navigation systems. For G1 and G2 level storms, though, the effects are fairly minimal. The more powerful solar storms are generated by coronal mass ejections and flares. A coronal hole, as in this case, is relatively passive. The solar wind is more powerful, but it's not being actively flung outwards with an additional push. The violent coronal mass ejection or flare, by contrast, actively ejects material outwards. The current solar cycle has already proven to be much stronger than initially expected and is going to continue in this vein for a little while longer. We've already seen some absolutely breathtaking auroral activity this year due to solar eruptions, and at much lower latitudes than such light shows usually reach. However, the NOAA has predicted that the maximum sunspot number for the current cycle will be 173. That's below the average maximum of 179 and very far below the highest on record, which was the 19th solar cycle with a maximum of 285 sunspots. That was in March of 1958. So here's hoping we get to see more swirling green skies in the months to come, or red or blue. And this is by Michelle Starr on Science Alert. Please leave your comments. Thank you for your support. Support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.